Hello, now, folks. Welcome back to the Cooldown with me and Nerdphonic. There he is. Look, waving, looking happy. We have done another Streamer Showdown, so it's time for another Cooldown. Season 4 has concluded, and it's now mine and Matt's job to go through the weekend with a fine-tooth comb, Matthew. We'll cover every detail, as well as answering your questions as well, which we'll get to at the end as ever. But it was Season 4, Matthew. Few changes, few things stayed the same. How did you find the weekend? As stressful as ever?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. A little, I don't know, maybe less so. No, I'm not going to lie. It's Showdown week. How many minutes are we in? We're just about a minute in. That's fine. It was fucking chaos as per usual. So
yeah, things became very fluid very quickly. It was a very is stressful the word? Yeah, it was. Yeah. The thing is, we have the same thing every time, right? We have this period of time where it's like, everything's looking absolutely fine, everything's looking great. Oh god, everything's gone wrong. Yeah. So
we get to that point of we're lulled into the false sense of security where, hang on, this has gone a bit too well. Why is this working fine? Why have things not broken yet? Oh no, that's why, because they've all now broken.
I'd like to think as well that people watching the weekend had absolutely no idea, or seeing the announcements at the weekend had absolutely no idea what's going on. But we'll now give you, this is sort of the Cooldown is like the behind the scenes, isn't it? This is where we get to basically vent about our sadnesses throughout the weekend. So where do we begin? I guess in terms of a lot of the planning, in terms of like the draft pool and that sort of thing, and the lineup actually was pretty much set in stone. We were waiting on Kev a little bit to find out if Kev was going to be able to do it, and Kev, obviously, because he's gone away on holiday the Monday before the showdown, basically concluded, I've not made enough time for myself to do it. So if anything, that's his fault. But we've got, obviously, being Kev, obviously Holly wanted to play him as the former champion, getting him back involved, having Clates there as well. It would have been quite nice. I'm sure we'll see Kev at some point. Obviously, we had him on the Lowdown on the Wednesday. And in credit to him, actually, put a lot of prep in for the Wednesday draft stuff. We did some great stuff on the Monday, which involved him. But that meant that things changed quite dramatically. And then, I won't say who came in or anything like that. That can remain a secret. But then, just as again, you think everything's calming down, Diz lets us know he won't be able to do the weekend or do the draft. Oh no, was it just the weekend or just the draft? Right?
I think it was everything. It was just
everything. Yeah. Which is fair enough. We said to Diz, that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. Life stuff is far more important than who's picking Mbappe. So don't worry about that. But that then caused us a tidal wave of about, I don't know, what was it, 2 or 3 hours of just, what do we do now? It was it was quite late in the day, and so our announcements always come out on the Sunday night, and this was Sunday morning. Am I right in saying?
Yeah, it was. I think it was about we knew, and we sort of, once we'd found out, it was around between 11 and 12ish, because I think we were already discussing it by around then.
So I don't think any of the guys will mind me saying this. I don't think Proudy will mind me saying this. So the original Lowdown panel was set to be, I've got to try to remember now. It was Stinger, Diz, Proudy, and
Mike.
Mike, of course, yeah, and Mike as well. And Proudy was going to take the place of Curty in the same way that Kev did. But then with Diz stepping away, it was like, okay, we've now got a 3 showdown spot that needs filling with someone, and it probably allows us to move things around a little bit. So it was a case of, well, who could we use? Now, we've got a list of people that we could have had involved, but part of building Lowdown panels, to me, is just as important as building showdown panels. And you can't have or showdown lineups. You can't have too many of people who do or say similar things or present in similar ways. And I think one of my biggest skills, actually, throughout all the showdown stuff we've ever done, is getting those lineups correct, actually. Yeah. Like, of all the things that I do, and I know people are sometimes critical of them, I actually think I always put together what is right for that weekend. So, and we've been talking about him for a while, and me and you had discussed it a little bit, and obviously he'd come up in the meetings towards the end of Sundays, and obviously he's my mate. So I was very cautious. We're talking about Matt Blanco. I should clarify here for people. I was very cautious to get him involved. I didn't want it to be upon people to be like, oh, it's just because he's your mate. Like, obviously, you've just thrown him in there. Actually, he's someone we talked about for a long time. We'd always thought he'd be good at it. We just wanted to see him be a bit more committed to streaming, which he had been. I think he's streamed as much as anyone in the last month. He's been really at it. And it just felt like the right sort of timing. it then helps because we know him. Actually, we can say to him, we can make him do whatever we want, basically. So we got him to travel from his house. So I feel about it. We got to travel from his house to Proudies. Now, for two people that live in London, that hour and a half commute from that Blanco isn't as nice as you would think, considering that we have to get announcements up by 8 o'clock that day. So he's got to get to Proudies, who's got a green screen. Proudies then panicking about setting up a room to do shots in because he's not got your professional setup. And then obviously getting that footage up online to you for then putting it together for announcement graphics. We're like almost one announcement graphic, but it's a case of we want to have some stuff for the future if we need it as well. So yeah, credit to both Proudy and Blanco, who sort of, with your help, managed to get something together, just about.
Yeah, it was serviceable for what it was needed for. But yeah, it's not the ideal time to have to be sort of charging around to get stuff or to change anything at that sort of late stage. But they both did very well considering the circumstances, and yeah, it was less than ideal for everyone involved, I think, but it is what it is ultimately. But I think we've got quite good at the need to pivot, and when we do, we usually do it pretty well.
Yeah, it was hopefully seamless for people. So we ended up with the Wednesday panel being Kev then took the Curty one afternoon spot that we had away from Proudy, because I just felt like the dynamic of having Blanco and Kev was a bit stronger than having Proudy and Kev, and it's hard to quantify by explaining to you without talking about it for half an hour about what it takes to produce a really good Lowdown panel. But yeah, it was so it just worked out the way it was. Proudy was really cool about it. I had plenty to do anyway, so I think he was. There's part of Proudy that was probably like, okay, good, I can focus on all the other bits you make me do every week. So we had Kev, Blanco, Stinger, and Mike, and that was a strong enough panel on its own. And then obviously you bring in Curty at the weekend, and you bring in someone that's done it for ages, and you can tell when watching Curty he's done it for ages. It goes as good as Kev is. It's a different type of level to what Curty brings, because he knows the cues with you. He becomes your right hand man, and without him and without Dan, obviously, who were taken away from the Lowdown panel, that obviously changes how you approach a weekend a little bit, or at least a draft, when you don't necessarily know what you're getting from two new people, Kev, where you never know what you're going to get, and Mike, who hadn't done it for a little while.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just sort of their experience in terms of what's required. It's also the relationship that you build with, or the rapport you build with a panel over not just me, but the between the panel themselves. You don't know how far you can push people. It's one thing, in private, what you can joke about, but what you can feel like you can joke about when you're in front of however many people are watching, and you don't want to come across as an asshole, or just who's going to be the joke man, who's going to be what. You don't know how to respond to how someone is going to react to what you're going to say. So I think there's all of that stuff. They're the real risks when it comes to putting together a panel of people that you've not known having worked together. And I think that was really the biggest thing that I think I had reservations for. And it wasn't even reservations. It was the only thing that I wasn't sure about in terms of Blanco, because we've been saying about having him since FM21, and it was more of a case of him getting his consistency up, because the streams that I've watched his sort of when he was streaming more sporadically, I've always enjoyed. I think he's a funny guy. So that was never really how he presents was never going to be the issue. It was more how he was going to sort of join in with everyone else. And I think he did really well, considering he's not really streaming on your own is one thing. Streaming with 5 other people, and also streaming with someone like Kev, for your first one is it's very different to then ending Curty's he gives you a bit more time, whereas Kev will just be on transmit for the entirety, because he basically streams as if he's the only man there anyway.
Yeah, Kev has. It's not a problem, but it's a trait, I guess, in that Kev can't deal with silence.
Yeah.
In the same way that I can't, in the same way that Jack and Z can't. We're not used to silence in the same way. So it's you have to be able to say something at a point when you feel like no one's saying anything. And Kev will consider. Well, he's thinking about it's not a criticism. He's thinking about the show. He's making sure that you don't have those low moments. He's trying to keep it on like a level at all times. But in a Lowdown panel, it's okay for it to go up and down. Like, it doesn't have to be on the same level the whole time. You kind of want those big moments and smaller moments rather than every moment feeling the same. Because Kevin's talking like this and something's happened and oh my God, draft 2 is amazing, right? There needs to be like different levels. I love that impression. And he's on holiday, Matt. He's not going to see this, is he?
He doesn't watch them anyway, does he?
No, but he definitely does. But equally, like, we think he's great on the Lowdown panel. Like, we always sort of knew he would be, but we sort of joked about the fact that he's clueless, and that would really affect and hinder.
It's the only thing is affected and hindered is his general persona. It shows that he actually knows what he's talking about. He's ruined himself.
That's true, and that was the grand plan. That was the master plan. Finally, to get him away from Showdowns and just keep him there forever now, hopefully. But speaking of Blanco then and of Stinger, we asked them. Not only did we bring 2 new people in, and Mike back hadn't been in for a while, and I thought was great as well. We had a situation where and we talked about this since the last one. Like, we always talk about what we could do better with Lowdowns. And with the help of Andrew, who works again, we talked about him in the last Cooldown, behind the scenes with the stats. It's like he's producing so much data and getting so much information. We have to find a way to bottle it down so we can use it in a way where people will love it and almost not notice that they're getting fed it, but are having so much more to talk about. So it became a conversation of, if we're going to have all this data, we have to be prepared to use it. So you do obviously the practice drafts on the Monday night, where you sort of go through the pool, so the guys in the Lowdown and the guys in the background have an idea of who's going to come up, when and how, and what drafts teams will look like and that sort of thing, and get a measure of the budget and things like this. And then for 2 hours after that, because obviously I don't take part in that because obviously I'm competing, but for the 2 hours after that, I come in as sort of the director of the Showdown and say, look, this is what I want us to do. These are the roles I want you to take on. This is how I want you to control the data that you're given. This is how I want us to approach looking at Showdowns. And the Lowdown this time around was far less about the players that were drafted and was much more about the managers that were taking part. And that's the route I want us to go down from now until sort of forever, really, is because I think that becomes the story a little bit of how are they drafting, why are they drafting. And yeah, there was a lot of preparation put in. We went through every single person. And as someone that's competing, I was at a position where I could sort of go, this is how this person drafts. And we were looking at patterns from previous Showdowns. And so one of them was Z, for the last 2 Showdowns, hadn't drafted a striker in his first 13 picks or something like that, or first 12 picks. And he focuses on building like a core through the center of his team and then branching it out. So having a good defense, having a good midfield, and then just seeing which strikers were left. And it was really interesting to follow, would he do that again a little bit? So we were able to pick up on loads of patterns, and hopefully the Lowdown will then able to let you know that those things were happening. We had those little things for each person. There's some really cool quirks, right? Holly was the other one who won last time, and 13 of the players she picked in our winning Showdown, she could have picked in this Showdown, and I think she got sort of 6 or 7 of them, and clearly felt like, I want to go with some guys I know work in the roles that I'm going to use. So yeah, obviously for you it became a question of directing it. So how did it differ, or was it quite similar for you in the role that you take on?
The only real change for me was knowing where I need to go to, because obviously we'd said about assigning people different roles to just so we weren't either getting overly repetitive, or people could then, when it came to their own prep, they could then focus in on a particular area of the data or just a football manager in general that they could then specialize in. It didn't mean that obviously other people can't then chip in with what they think, but we had Stinger, who was sort of our tactics man. He kind of replaced Dan as the Northern tactic person. He even referred to himself as Viking Dan off Wish. So I think that it's very harsh on himself, really. But that was the role he facilitated. Blanco was more like real-time stats about what was happening, and I thought he did that role really well. Mike was more sort of bringing us the emotional story throughout the weekend, and then Curtie was about historical data. And it also meant that Andrew could then focus the information he was bringing for each game week or each knockout stage. He could then aim that at the right person, so at least one person had one new point that we hadn't brought up before, or building up from that point. So it meant that we had consistent different talking points to use. It's rare that we have lulls in any point. But sometimes you do need to fill for whatever reason, like if the game needs to be restarted, or for any other reason, we need to have something there to talk about whilst we do something else. Because it's live at the end of the day, we want to make it look as professional as possible. But there are always those times, like even if you watch like live sport on TV, you can tell when someone is filling because something has happened that's not supposed to. Like I remember like watching the Euros when Christian Eriksen collapsed, and like aside from the broadcaster showing stuff they shouldn't have really been showing, the presenters were like, or the commentators at the time were like, I don't know how many more times we can say this. And it took them 25 minutes before they cut back to the studio. We've never really been in that position, but having this extra stuff means that we can. It's just then, I guess, down to me as like the director of the program to make sure I'm going to the right person to give me the right sort of, or at least leading in with that question, expecting to get the answer using the data we've pulled up. But because it's on the fly and I don't have, like, Andrew effectively becomes like a runner or producer at that point. He's like saying, these are your points for the next game week. So it's then up to me to sort of phrase that in a question in a way that I'm going to get the response using the data that he's provided us with.
And it's such a new element for us as a panel to then take on board and use and make people feel informed. Basically, the goal is always the same. It has to be good for the viewer. Like, it's not about like everyone else having to. They're not creating a portfolio of this is how good I am on the Lowdown. It's a case of we need to make sure that the people watching feel informed what's going on, and not just in the moment, but again, applying what's historical, applying how Mike would have felt in that situation, having had a really successful showdown and a pathetic one, being there, so I can say pretty fire. But having the context of both those things is great. And I think one thing that actually we should definitely mention is that as much as we have these preparation periods, there is this requirement on the guys on the Lowdown to go away and look at it themselves and then come back on a Saturday and bring things that we're not expecting them to talk about, but equally have gone away and figured out what they're expecting. So massive props to all of them, actually, all 5 of them that were on the Lowdown this time around, and Andrew working behind the scenes furiously for doing some phenomenal stuff. Like, Andrew will never get the credit. People will never understand the work he's putting in, but the shift that he put in over the weekend behind the scenes was phenomenal.
Not to mention he's like his time zone as well is
he's like not in the UK, so so it's one of those things. He's on time more than Z, so there's one thing to say. Actually, Z was very good this weekend. He'll want me to say that. He'll be like, whoa, I said I was on time. I said, yeah, fair enough, you were. Other than the Saturday when your computer broke, or Wednesday, sorry, when your computer broke. But so speak just quickly on Blanco and Stinger. It's our classic phrase, Matt, which has become a Cooldown special. It's a risk, but it's not that much of a risk, because we kind of know like what we're expecting from both of them, and we got exactly what we were hoping. It's still like with Lowdowns, it can be difficult to find your voice a little bit, and eventually you kind of have to find yourself and then just become that character almost for the weekend. Curtie doesn't have that problem anymore. Kev's never had that problem in life. Dan doesn't have that problem either. But for Mike, Stinger, and Blanco, especially for 3 new people, they kind of needed to bed themselves in, right? So Mike was giving you sort of like the straight line of this is what's happening and this is how it's happening. Stinger's trying to give you the almost the thing you can't see, and Blanco's making little quips now and again. And it's about finding the dynamic of how that works, alongside them being like professional Lowdown panelists. They're doing all those little extra bits that sort of make you in tune and in track with what's going on. And I thought for 2 new people, I'm going to leave Mike out because he's done it loads. But for 2 new people, they were good, weren't they? Really enjoyed.
Really good. To be fair to Mike as well, that he'd not done. I mean, he first came into Showdowns as he was one of the risks because he'd not been streaming for very long. And he hadn't really interacted with a lot of us when we first brought him in, but he was good off the bat. But you can tell that he's had a year plus now of streaming under his belt since that point, and sort of night and day between. He's not the same person like on stream anymore. Like he's changed so much, and just not in just terms of his own confidence. But just how he presents himself, how he's able to carry himself. He doesn't look like a rabbit in headlights. He didn't really look like that, but I think you can tell when someone is inexperienced in interacting with people remotely in that sort of scenario. Blanco less so because he's younger, he's used to it. Whereas Mike, I think it was a very much a new environment. But yeah, I felt like it was worth mentioning that Mike, although hasn't done these in a while, he equally sort of ducked to water again, despite not having. I don't think he did one for the entirety of FM21. So
yeah, and the hidden thing behind this as well is you've met all of them in the last 4 months, 3 months. Blanco just a couple of weeks ago, sort of our friendship circle.
I actually met him in October. Played 5-a-side with Blanco.
Yeah, of course you'd met him, but more recently. I mean,
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so he knew to be scared of you. He was very aware that, do not mess up. The amount of times he's messaging me going, I really want to let Matt down. I'm like, you'll be fine. Just don't talk ever. Everything will be fine. But a really, really good panel. Really exciting to see how it changed. In terms of the lineup, we welcome back Clates, but we'll come on to Clates a little bit later on. He was a little bit successful. I mean,
could say that.
Irritating, isn't it? But Holly came back in, of course. RDF returned as well. We've talked about before how we sort of work showdowns in twos, and you almost are getting a shot of redemption a little bit before the next showdown, which, again, as of recording right now, I've got no idea what it looks like in terms of people on any position right now. So we've got a little bit of time. The next showdown isn't quite at the end of the month because we figured people would want to watch the Champions League final. We'll confirm those dates at the end. You can probably figure them out. So let's move on to the draft then, because it was something we'd not done before. And again, there was no twist, like obvious big twist, but this was kind of a twist in that we did an under 24s, players age 24 included as well. At the very start of Football Manager, sadly you can't do it right now. And then having squad sizes of your choice. You could have gone between 14 and 20. And then I'm trying to think. And then we added 2 new leagues: the Eredivisie and Liga NOS. Or is it Liga?
It's not
Liga Premier or Premier Portuguese.
Primeira Liga is what it's officially known as now.
You've nailed that. I've called it 3 things and got them all wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, so 7 leagues as well that you could have picked from. So some new players like Anthony were involved from the Eredivisie, and then again a whole host of Portuguese stars that we've never seen before. So really exciting to see a new panel. Did it go? Did people's draft? Obviously, one draft didn't. We'll come to that. But did it go as you expected it to go in terms of, because we did 14 to 20 player selection? Did that go how you thought? Because it didn't go how I thought it would go.
I guess I was leaning on what Kev was saying. I think because Kev has won so many showdowns, I think what he tends to say tends to maybe ring true in people's minds. I didn't expect anyone to go crazy and go for the minimum. Mainly because I think in the league you'd be fine. I think when you come to knockouts, I think that's really where the squad game falls into place. And I think having those options once, especially with again, we'll get onto squad revived rule changes, but I think once you get to sort of the latter stages, like the showdown itself is played effectively over 2 months. It starts at the very start of August, and then it's all done and dusted by the end of October. So there's a lot of games with only a few days in between them, and I think people would be done. It would be fascinating if someone had done, and we could have seen how well they did. Like if they say someone picks a squad of, or drafts a squad of 14, they blitz the league because they've got players who are worth that little bit more per player than anyone else in the pool or in they're playing against. But then when it comes to the knockouts, they just fall away because they just don't have the fitness. Bearing in mind you've got 3 subs, if that's the case, which would be mind blowing. Because if you're playing high pressing football, or alternatively, your style is completely dictated by the fact that you only have 3 players to replace. All you need is 1 or 2 suspensions, and you are knackered. So I don't think I could ever see someone sort of risking it unless they really were trying to prove a point that it's possible.
Yeah, because everyone went for 20 apart from Holly and RDF. He went for, I want to say 18. Did RDF go 17?
RDF had 17. Apparently it was a misclick, but prove that. Who knows?
Unlucky, mate. Yeah, I think it's funny though, because he didn't. We talked about it, right? It may have been a misclick, but he didn't have that much money left anyway, so it wasn't like about 5 million.
Yeah, he had about 5 mil left.
That he had left. Yeah, it wasn't going to change his team massively. Would it have given him a bit more depth? Yes. Should he have done that? Probably. I always intended. I think I toyed with the idea of going for 18 and just keeping it standard, but I think the opportunity to have a backup, like a true backup in basically every outfield position was too good to pass up. So you kind of had to go for it. And I was in the weird position of not picking strikers as well. So I just had this endless amount. Someone looked at it, was like, you've got 11 defenders. It's like, yeah, I do have a lot of defenders. Now back off my defenders. It went well for me. Defended excellently. So yeah, it was
Glad you said that.
see.
I didn't feel like you'd.
Yeah, it was excellent to see. We conceded the least amount of goals in the league, but what does that mean, Matthew? Absolutely.
What does
nothing.
that mean?
Absolutely nothing. We'll talk about strikerless later on. I've got a few things I want to say, but no, back to it. So I thought everyone would end up going for 20. I totally agree with Kev that going for that amount was probably the smart choice. Again, for Kev, it's you're risk averse, isn't it? It's like if you get 20, you're giving yourself the most amount of get outs that you require, and it allows you to pick up a backup keeper basically for free. It feels like compared to normal, where sometimes people haven't gone for it. I think a lot of the people that normally don't picked one this time. It was like I can spend under $1 million on a keeper that will just sit there if I need him to, and it went pretty well for Clates that thought process as well.
That one time,
It turns out good move.
Yeah.
So again, really interesting. It was great to see like Wonder Kid teams crop up. It was different. Like we've had a big discussion on the budget. The budget was 350 million, which was a budget we had before. We were toying with 300. We were toying with 400. I think we even talked about having it less than like that at one point as well. It was like how difficult do you want to make it? There's this idea that a smaller budget makes it more difficult. Whether it makes it more difficult or not, I don't know. Definitely makes it more competitive. Like the players then become a lot more premium, and again, I guess the decisions become more difficult. And so, in that sense, yeah, it is challenging because it's arguably why Holly didn't pick Haaland when she could have done. She didn't want to spend 30-20 million more than she thought she'd have to, and it throws your draft plan out the window. And if you've not prepped for that, which I think would be Holly's argument, like I didn't really prep for Haaland, I can't then draft him and then not know what comes next. Whereas Dan knew exactly what he'd do if Haaland came around. So for Dan, it was an easy choice for him, and yeah, worked out relatively well. But we've seen it before. Having that one player, Matt, doesn't always guarantee anything. Like it's so difficult. And ultimately for Dan, he didn't get to a final, didn't win. Like he went very close. But yes, those decisions you make in the draft, we always say it right. You can't win it on Showdown night or on draft night, but you can definitely lose it.
I think this particular draft pool was the most that we'd collectively deliberated over for any pool. And I think more about balancing than anything. Really, it was like I think from the start we said we wanted to add some new leagues in, because we had a few ideas before.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, go back 3 weeks. Blimey, the draft pool changed a lot actually. Yeah. You're right.
And then it was a case of we need to work out a way to balance it out so that it's not, so that there isn't, especially because we didn't want to have like an unlimited budget. But then how do we make it so that these like players that are above a certain value just become completely redundant and are just there in name and are never going to get picked because they're too expensive. That's where the under 24 cap came in. But yeah, I think it must be, I reckon probably 10 hours collectively it was spent in deciding that draft pool over a month, like before it became like before it was finalized. Because it was like sitting in calls with ourselves or with each of us and deciding like looking at draft pools, the different permutations, which players are going to be available, and seeing how like what is this going to look like once you're like 18, 20 picks deep, and seeing like how fair are the teams going to be, because there is, or at least how fair can they be, because there is always that issue that if there are 11 like superstars, and then after that there's a massive drop off, which we kind of saw with goalkeepers this time round. Like there is always going to be a premium playing position, because whichever pool you select, there's always going to be a restriction somewhere. Like we found, I think with the England draft we did, right backs was the real premium spot, where after the likes of Trent, Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Reece James, there's not really a huge amount of depth there for a real high quality pick. And this time around it was goalkeepers, where I think after Aaron Ramsdale there's a real big drop off in the level of ability, despite the change in price not being too drastic. So it then adds that little seed of doubt for some people. Like we saw Donnarumma go, like it was Chez's second pick.
Yeah, but he went second overall.
Yeah, second for a goalkeeper, which never happens.
Yeah. And I think we got a question on Twitter about that. We'll talk about goalkeepers later, because there's a theory around them, and actually having Donnarumma be that is there's logic to it. We'll talk about it later on. Do you want to? I mean, I'll let you decide, because we may also do this type of thing in the future. Can we talk about what the original plan was? I'm looking at it on the 8th of April.
I reckon we leave it as we will say, if we use it, we will say this is what we were going to use for season 4.
Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough. All right, it's interesting.
So keep an eye out for future cooldowns to find out which pull we would have potentially used in season 4.
Which was rejected, which was the rejected pull.
But it wasn't rejected, it was just we changed it.
It evolved into what was then. Yeah, but there was things we definitely wanted to do, which was we wanted to use new leagues, and we wanted to make it different to what we'd done before, and we definitely did that. And I think it was really cool to see that Mbappe didn't go. That was the big conversation, right? Obviously, I had a pathetically performing Mbappe before. Did that affect people not picking him? I said if we'd scored 15, I bet he'd gone. As in, if he'd have scored 15 in season 3, I bet he goes first round.
Oh, but Stinger was standing for him for the entirety of the draft, hoping that someone would go for him. It is worth mentioning, actually. I don't know if it's one of the questions for later, but in terms of the draft pool, I do think, and this is why I wanted to bring up the point about the deliberation phase over what we were going to use, is I think there is always a fear that we can get a bit too convoluted when it comes to like the draft pool itself. It depends on how, I guess, informed or how often other people, like you guys watching this, wherever you're watching this, actually use draft mode. There are a whole load of options that you can actually do. You can restrict sort of picks to certain types of player pick for a set number of rounds and things like that. But the difficulty for us is how we convey that message to everyone. And looking at the general Twitch chat whilst we're live, seeing some people get confused over what the draft pool is, like just being able to give them out as a short message saying this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, how do we do that if if we did get more convoluted? I think like there being like a twist, people kind of expect it, but that's supplementary to the draft usually. And I think that's probably why we spent the most time over this time round to make sure that it was the right level of different without it being ridiculous.
Yeah, because that it's not a question, but I'm going to answer it now. We will never do 20 different nations where people go because when people go, it'd be really interesting. You're right. It would be a horrible thing to broadcast. It'd be so difficult to broadcast and get across. And also, I'm relying on 9 Football Manager players to get this spot on as well throughout a draft. Like, I don't deny having do it alphabetically. Everyone gets a player with a surname beginning with A, and then everyone gets a player with this nationality and that nationality. If you could do that the only way you could realistically do it is so in Football Manager's filters at the moment, it's every 5 picks you can change the restrictions. If they changed it so every round they change the restrictions, yes, that thing becomes a little bit easier, because we can then navigate how it looks. So then you can plan for how it looks. But if people are doing it randomly, like that is like, oh, this time I'm going to get a player from Gabon, I'm definitely going to get Aubameyang. There aren't any others. Like you don't want that sort of thing to crop up. You can't have that sort of situation. So you are planning for what will happen, and so the bigger and wider and more, again, I'll use the word interesting. More interesting you make the draft pool, the more challenging it becomes for a Lowdown panel and for the people drafting who are preparing. You don't want people involved to look at that and go, I can't be arsed. Like, I'll just see what happens on the night. Yeah. You don't really want that. You want there to be an idea of, I want to know what's coming here.
There's also a lot of wasted effort as well when it comes to the Lowdown. Like the graphics and stuff that are put together, that's all done. Like we'll have the draft prep on the Monday. So bear in mind the draft is on the Wednesday. We will have all of the panel submit the players that they're going for, like their golden picks, their red alert picks, and all of the other like wild cards, everything like that. They each give me 5 players for each for the leagues they've been assigned to research. But someone's got to go and make those graphics. And unfortunately, this time around, I didn't have Dan to do that for me. So I had to. That was like an additional task that I had to take on top of everything else. And because I'd not really done them properly. I've done a couple. I've worked with Dan on the template, but I've not actually done them myself before. When you're trying to put together that many different players, whilst getting the information out of Football Manager and trying to make sure you're getting them done and accurately, it's a lot of work. and then I've got to but then it's even worse when that's a lot of work that then ends up not getting used. So the more convoluted that the pool gets, the less likely we are to see, like, because we kind of have to anticipate what people are going to pick, and the more, I guess, not obtuse, I think is probably the word, is that the draft pool gets, the more difficult that becomes to predict for us, and so the less likely those graphics get to be used. And so it feels like more wasted effort than anything when we've done all of that, and then 3 players out of the predicted 50 end up going. It's and then we end up not being able to use it. Like, we have changed things to make them so they are kind of reusable, but even then, if that draft pool is like so far off piste compared to what we normally do, they'll never get used, and it just
that's it, right?
Yeah.
You have to take those little bits into account. We'll talk about the rule change very quickly because it's relatively brief, and how it was deployed. So we changed the revive, that it's now called, the squad revive. Shout out to Manscaped for helping with that, although they didn't sponsor this showdown, so it's our thing now. So you don't have the word revive, all right? So we'll have that, which of course has been the magic sponge and the lemon wipe under previous brands. But yeah, so we changed it so it doesn't. So we got rid of the squad wipe that everyone had. Everyone had a spare squad wipe that they could use at any point. It was a one-off thing. Once you use it, it's done. And then you mid-showdown, sort of the gap between the elimination game and the knockout stages, everyone still receives that one wipe, which removes all fitness issues that you could have. Does not remove suspensions, just fitness issues. What we did this time around, you'd get 3 slots or 3 spots, or 3 revives is the best way to look at it, which could revive anything, it's suspensions or injuries, and you could use that on one player at any point. So you only get 3 of them. The league winner still gets this golden revive, which is the complete fitness wipe, which became quite a powerful tool and now gives the league a little bit more emphasis. But bringing it in so they could use it for suspensions, Matt, as well as bringing it in for injury crises. It's one of the best decisions we've made, in my opinion. Like, we talked about it in the Sunday meeting. Most people tend to agree it's a massive change that actually hugely impacts how you play a showdown weekend and makes you think about it a little bit more. And again, it's a lovely little element to have. That we're not seeing, the one thing I really want to get away from was we're not seeing, other than the league winner where Clates did it against Dan, to really good effect, I might add as well, we're not seeing it used as basically give all of your players plus 10 in attributes anymore. It's just a case of having to pick and prod when you would need it. And it's such a sick change.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like how effective resetting everyone's fitness and removing injuries. There was a period where we weren't really noticing it have so much of effect during the pretty much, I'd say, the entirety of FM21, and then all of a sudden, I think the first time for FM22, the first season, we really noticed like the effect was so pronounced. That's when the discussion started about, is this too overpowered to the point where people will just hold on to it until they really need it. But yeah, I think the jeopardy that you have now is that, do I Jack showcased this absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
Where he used his gradually, but then he had the jeopardy of which player do I end up using it on, or do I save it just in case? Because he had 2 players that were suspended. He chooses to revive one of them or bring one of them back from his suspension. And then when it comes to the final, Clates has basically got a home run. He's got one left. He's able to use one on a play. He doesn't really need it to, but he's got it, so he may as well use it. Jack doesn't, and his players are running on fumes at that point.
Yeah. So there's a big element of luck, right? You can't dictate who's going to get injured, who's going to get suspended. But that's like that. I talked about this on my stream the other day. It's why we brought it in to begin with. We knew there's this element of Football Manager will screw you over. Here's your safety card, if you like, of you can use this at any point and it'll save your team from being decimated. You don't want a situation. I think of it if you're Dan, right? He had Erling Haaland. You don't want Haaland out in game 1. And then you don't see him again for the whole tournament. Ruins Dan's experiences of a draft, not what he planned for. Like, you want to be able to give him an opportunity to bring him back. If you've picked a player that's injury prone and he gets injured all the time, well, do due diligence, do your research. Like, you should have seen that coming a little bit. But yeah, I think part of what we've done is you want managers to have to make more decisions, basically, and decisions outside of the in-game elements of Football Manager. It's almost like an outside element of, I've got this special thing I can do that I can't do in regular Football Manager, where I can start to bring players back. And I think the chats get more involved. You only got to look at Jack's, right? They're all going, get this guy, do that guy, and then Jack can't win because people are asking to do different things. But it's such a fun new element for us to involve. And it's definitely something we're going to do moving forward as well. It's great.
Yeah, I think it was the right move to make, allowing more freedom, but equally making it more difficult to choose which players you use it for. Like we saw, I'll use Jack as the example again. He had Marcus Edwards, who got a broken leg. I think he was out between 5 and 8 months. Decides not to bring him back, and then I think he ended up having both of his centre halves were suspended, and then he also ended up getting himself an additional suspension for Theo Hernandez because he'd appealed. So he ended up he thought he was going to have him back for the final, ends up being suspended because of the additional matches he gets banned for. It's just like, this has worked out better than I think either of us probably anticipated, really.
Considering what was at stake at that point, it made it that bit more interesting. It's funny because people probably think, you're making it easier for them, like giving them 3 and they can use it for both injuries and suspensions. We're making it harder for them because now, because if it was just injuries, it's obvious where you use them, right? If it's just suspensions, you add in that extra element of, I could bring back this guy that's just cost me a game, which is the situation you might find yourself in if he's got a red card. But yeah, fun. Let's go back to the draft very briefly then, after having discussed the rule change. Thomas FM, as I'm full naming him because you can tell why. I've settled down a little bit from the weekend where I was not best pleased. It's funny, isn't it? Because we've talked about it at length. We talked about it on Sunday at length as well. He's got away with being the first person to do it in a sense because I don't want it seen again. He's like swapping the squad rounds. Actually, he's a sneeze, Matt. Apologies. Sorry, viewers. I'm allergic to Team of Toms. It happens. But no, it's interesting because there is this element, and I'm sure people watching right now will go, he's been very grumpy about this. Only because he finished bottom of the league. God, you had no idea how pleased I was to beat him on Sunday so I could talk about it like this. From the element of like social interaction, social engagement, it being a talking point, of course, I'm running a Streamer Showdown. I want that to be a thing. I love that there is this part of me detached from being in the role that I am that thinks this is bloody great. Like, how stupid is this? How fun's this? There is a massive portion of me that was not happy. I understand him picking it. I get the fun of that, but actually, there are loads of reasons why it's a bad idea. I could list 10 as to why I don't like it. Whether that be Lowdown prep, how it alters a draft, how it then affects everyone's mindsets on a Sunday and a Saturday, how it changes the dynamic of a weekend entirely, how it makes the person in the elimination game feel if they lose to them, how it makes anyone feel if you lose to them, how it then makes chats react to you if you lose to it. He kind of goes in, and the thing that really, Tom ruined himself a little bit because Tom said, I expected to come into this and get no points. So you're throwing the weekend? Like, again, the element of what if someone had come in and really wanted to be in a showdown and wanted to win a showdown? Are you sort of giving that spot up by doing it? We know Tom. We both know Tom very, very well. You've met Tom. I know he's not done it and thought about all the list I've just given you there. He's done it because he thinks this will be great entertainment. This will be great fun. Everyone's going to love this. And he's not thought about the other side of it. It's not necessarily his job to think about the other side of it, but it is mine. And for all the reasons I've listed, I don't like it, and there's two sides. For lots of people watching, for some of you watching, it will have enriched the competition. For others, it would have made it a bit of a joke, a bit of a farce. And we always say, like, between competitive Football Manager and like not caring, we're at like a 3-4 on the spectrum of like and 1 being total fun, 10 being professional, high-level, multi-million pounds esports. We want there to be like an element of fairness and an element of competitive integrity to it. And I know what people are going to say, so I'm going to clarify this. You changed the squads around once. We did do that, but we did it on an unlimited budget where people could pick the best available teams, and then we swapped the best possible available teams around. Like, we kind of knew in that sense what we were doing as well. There are times to do that. It changed the landscape of the draft, Matt, which is why I'm having to bring it up now, really. because he's picking a team with Toms, it then allows, and Clayton said this in this interview with Diz on the channel, you should definitely check it out. It then allows Clayton to get Calvert-Lewin, Isaac, and there was another one, Osherman, right? So a three-striker combination, along with me not picking strikers, Tom then not caring about strikers unless they're called Tom, like you then create what is an unbalanced draft. And that causes its own problems. The bigger issue for me is how it makes people feel if they lose to it and the reaction they're going to get from their own chats, some of which will be in jest and some of which will be like, the banter of the showdown. Some people will just be vile when it comes to that because the internet. And I said to everyone, like, he's lucky you played me on the Sunday because if he'd have beaten someone else in that, I don't know how someone's going to feel. I don't know how Holly would feel in that situation. I don't know how Clates would feel in that situation, or RDF, or anyone else in that situation of losing to a team of Toms under the pressure of, like, why I said what I said in the elimination game. If I win, I'll beat a team of Toms. If I lose, I've beaten a team of Toms. Like, it wasn't very nice to be involved in. You saw me on the Sunday. I was pretty despondent pre-elimination game. Like, I wasn't happy with the situation I'd been put in. Because I couldn't win, really. And that would have been the same for anybody else in that situation. Going back to what I said at the very start, because I'm sort of monologuing here, I do get the fun element of it. I do understand that element of it. I'd be stupid not to. But overall, I didn't like it.
Well,
and I couldn't like it, really.
We had so after it had all sort of happened, me and you had a conversation about sort of our general thoughts at the time. I wouldn't say you were irate, but you were absolutely unhappy with it. And I wouldn't say I was enthralled by the prospect of dealing with it, but equally, like, the benefits, like, from I was coming at it probably rather than from an entirety of the competition, I was coming at it from a Lowdown perspective, thinking that he himself isn't expecting it, no one else is expecting him to get points. So from a narrative perspective, if he does, that's a lovely bit of storytelling. It's like one of the team that somehow manages to get through the playoffs, like, with a surge late at the end of the season and gets to the Premier League. That's kind of the and then in their first season in the Premier League, they do like way better than expected, and that's kind of the narrative arc I was hoping for. And we kind of did get to a point. He started off really well and then fell away at the end of it. But the point I raised to you was, if it was the example I used was Zealand, because it was the only real obvious thing I thought where there's sort of an inbuilt reason for him to do it, or justification for him to do it, would be if he decided, you know what, I've been goaded enough about, like, me being the only American, sod it, I'm going to pick a team of just Americans. And then how we would have reacted if it would have been Z. And I think the thing I'd said to you was, if it was Z, I would have probably been less annoyed, because he would have backed himself to be tactically astute enough to be able to manage that team to do something. But at the same time, if it turned out that he was just awful because the team was so undervalued in comparison to everyone else, like, all of those points that you raised still stand. Like, the draft pool opens up entirely for everyone else. It basically gives everyone else a gimme, unless there happens to be like a real high level, like an American international. And also, it kind of tells everyone the draft strategy. You know, like, if it's in a US international, then you know he's going for him. So either you can choose to burn a pick of yours to sabotage him even more, or you just know that, well, he's going for those, that's fine, there you can have them. So it can ruin the element of that side of the draft as much as anything. So yeah, I think now that the precedent has been set, equally, like, the difficult thing for us is we don't want to be too prescriptive over what you can and can't draft.
Yeah.
I think it was more, we were a bit more irked that it sort of wasn't ran past us as a cursory thing of, what do you think? Is this okay?
Yeah. And I think it's supposed to tell me about that. Just on that, very briefly, people will go, well, he's not going to tell Benji, is he? Well, no, you should tell Matt. You should, like, in that situation, like, Tom knows it well enough. And I want to reiterate, because we are sort of going at Tom a little bit here, I don't think there's any bone in Tom's body that did this maliciously.
Oh, not at all.
I just think for us, it becomes an issue and something we have to address and talk about a little bit. because it's like it's. In fairness to Tom, he's given us a great bit of content for the cooldown. But like it has to be a talking point. Like we have to address it in some senses and give both sides to it. Like understand the side that everyone was sort of reacting to, right? And everyone became, ironically, everyone became Team Tom at that point. Like it became a thing people wanted to root for. But if you have people who we talked about before, like you can't throw a game in a showdown weekend. That's been explicitly said to everyone. You can't just throw one for the sake of it. I think I personally did it in season 1 of the first ever showdown before there was any type of rules. Really, it was just like it will annoy Herb. Like Herb didn't want to play Foxy. Kev tries to make it about him. It was actually about Herb, and I was playing Herb, and I was already like 3-0 down. And if goal difference dictated that he would end up playing Foxy in the next round that he didn't want to do, I let him win 8-0 instead of 3-0 or something like that. I got to the final anyway, so lost obviously, but I got to the final. Yeah, that was sort of like the last time it was okay to happen. We had a situation once where someone, I won't say who, someone let someone win after a crash, and it was like, do not do that. Like what's happened before is irrelevant. We go again, totally fresh. And to me, like Tom drafting the way he did, he kind of threw it, and you don't really want to see that. Like, in fact, you don't want to see that. I'll be like sterner on it. You don't really want to see that. But as I say, he's kind of got away with it. In the same way with the switch teams round, you can kind of only do that once. What Tom did with a team of Toms, hats off, because no one else is going to be allowed to do it. so he's so he will live in infamy now as the guy that drafted a team with his own name. Shout out to Kevin Chapman for the horrendous idea. Should be giving him more blame for this. Next time, Tom, I'll give you £100 to not do it, so you can make your money. Unbelievable. Right, we've talked a lot there. I don't know how long we've been recording for that, but we've talked a lot about the pre-matches part of the showdown. But again, a lot of the background stuff actually came from pre-Saturday Sunday, because Saturday and Sunday went bloody well, Matthew. Frankly, there were no real issues to talk of, other than my tactic, really. The Saturday was kind of like it went to form a little bit. Like Clates did really well, Z looked pretty strong, Jack did well that weekend as well. Holly didn't do so well as returning champion. Ches picked Donnarumma first, so what did he expect? It was interesting to see the way that the Saturday kind of went as expected, and to the point where I think we should just move on from it, Matt. There wasn't a great deal to talk about other than Clates won the league again. He's back.
There was. I mean, there was the.
If you want it, you can. I won't take it away from you.
It was more the last game week drama where Ches managed to escape. Like he had to beat you, and he did just. Like it wasn't the most convincing of things, but that was like from a. That last game week, it was filled with drama, which was nice to have. So
yeah, you always want it, right? You always want it to be there.
Absolutely. But yeah, we won't sort of dig into you too hard. Don't worry. I did that. I did that during the briefing. I was doing jokes.
I'm sure there's some questions about it, but strikerless. It became a sort of like, you know me, Matt. I like to create a talking point every show now.
I mean, if that's what you're going to tell yourself you were doing, that's fine.
No, you were more critical. I can't believe this. Matthew Hall was more critical of me this weekend than I've ever seen him be of anything, and I've got beanbags. Like it's unbelievable that he's never come at me. So did you not like it? We've not really talked about it because you're very neutral on Showdown week. Actually,
I have to be.
But go on then. Give me your thoughts. You're watching Derby.
No, like so we had discussions about about the plan.
I just realised, Matt, we've talked for 5 to 10 minutes about throwing. People are going, well, Ben picked strikerless.
Well, this is actually what I said to Tom. So, like, Tom, bless his little heart, was like really like cut up about everything, about sort of the drama that had been created, and I kind of gave him the example of that. It's in a way it's kind of no different to sort of deciding you're going for a tactic and it's not working. The difference is if you've gone for if you've selected a particular tactic and it doesn't work, but you've at least drafted the best players you can for that tactic. Yeah. That's a bit different versus picking a heavily undervalued team compared to everyone else.
Very different, to be clear.
Oh no, I would, but yeah. I'm just saying, like that was the example I'd given, but I think what we're seeing is what works in single player doesn't necessarily translate wholly to the PvP world. Admittedly, yes, it's the same match engine, etc. Blah blah blah. But at the same point, you drafted for one system and one system only, and
no,
yeah,
I didn't. It's not true.
You did though. Like,
but you don't know if that's true or not, do you?
Well, I mean, the fact that you threw everything at it, all of the different permutations, like you went into panicked Benji mode again, where you just yeah.
When? No, you have to be able to back it up. You can't just go Like I picked a team that was meant for the striker system that I used, but then that's why I went Havertz second or third or whatever it was. Like,
I would have if like, irrespective, I would have still, like, you didn't have a proper plan B outside of, like, you had different permutations of strikerless, but you didn't have a striker to use should you need it. You were always relying on other players that can do the role, yes, but they're not sort of known for it. Like Havertz was your, like, top goal scorer, but he failed to turn up. Like, you can't legislate for that. It just seems to be that you...
It wasn't the only one, let me tell you. Good Lord.
Like, there were, like... It did seem that, like, luck was not on your side either, but it would have been... If you had... It would have been interesting to see if you'd have had a striker that you could have brought in, like, because ultimately people have set up for your tactic in a particular way to try and nullify you. And, like, all of the theory, like, we spoke well ahead of this and what you were planning on doing, and like I was fully in your corner. I said, yeah, like, and the fact that you drafted like most of the players that you said you wanted, you were able to get. I was like, this could, I wouldn't be surprised if you do something, and then it just, people managed to either nullify you or the tactic just didn't quite bed in, whatever it was. Yeah. But it would have been interesting to see if you'd decided, you know what, we'll start with strikerless, and if it doesn't work, fair enough. I've always got this, like, plan B or plan C in my pocket where I do have a striker on the bench and I can bring him on and we can change things up and people won't be ready for it. And then that's when I get goals, because they've set up to sort of block the midfield off and stop me from attacking them that way. And then now they can't handle it because I'm lumping the ball over that midfield and I'm just hoovering up goals. So it would have been, maybe that's what a thing for next time. But I think it's more you kind of made a rod for your own back in a way where that you didn't give yourself enough flexibility, like proper flexibility, like rather than just having players that can play, sort of be flexible but not flexible enough, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
There was a plan for that, which is really interesting. And you say, like, I should have got strikers. In some of the I did 3 practice drafts with my Discord, and in one of them I ended up with Maxi Gomez and Darwin Núñez as my Uruguayan partnership that would be able to do exactly what you've just said. But this is the Showdown draft, right? I don't know if those players of that caliber will be available towards the end. So just give you just to make it all about me for a moment. It almost went a little bit too well at the beginning, in that I got Trent, I got Havertz, I got Pedri that I really wanted, that, like, as a quartet. Then the problem came is I really wanted a left back, and the one, and because I felt like my system depended on having really good fullbacks. I had to have them. If I didn't have them, nothing would have worked. So I had the options of getting like Renan Lodi. There's one other, I can't remember who it was at this point, because DeMarco had gone, Hernandez had gone. I think someone else may have gone as well. So I ended up getting Chilwell, who's 39 million, and in a draft of 350 million, spending 10% of your budget on a left back. So my first 5 picks or so were really strong, like to the point where I wasn't expecting to get. I think I went LaCroix quite early on as well. I'm trying to think who else I had in there. I think Rafinha was relatively early. So I'd spent a lot of the money. By the time I had, and so when people look back at it now, they'll remember, oh yeah, Ben did have like 50 million, 60 million towards the back end. I think maybe I had 100 million actually towards the end. And the theory at that point was, I'm going to buy 2 strikers. They're all gone. So I ended up getting Mason Mount, who was horrendous, and then Leao, who could have played similar to Havertz, could play as a striker. So I did have those 2 striker options. It just meant that my midfield would be weaker because I'd have to take Havertz out. Leao was a winger, like primarily. So yeah, it just worked out that they'd gone, and in previous drafts I'd practiced for, there were always a couple left somewhere, and it just didn't work out. When Clates picks 7 strikers, it's quite difficult to find the ones that are left over. So I did sort of half plan for it. The conversation around like it being the same engine, because I sort of started it, it's the same engine, it just didn't work. Does it work PvP? It doesn't win PvP. It doesn't win a tournament.
I think the difference.
But does it work? Absolutely. You asked Dan, RDF, Jack, a few of the other people that probably should have felt like they got beat. I think Clates would even say like it definitely works. It just didn't work against what I was using. It definitely works. Again, can it win a showdown in that iteration? Probably not. Like I'll just say it now. Like it probably won't win a showdown. Can that system beat Clates' 3 striker shadow striker thing? No.
The difference is the AI will make a limited number of changes in comparison to what a human can, and we've seen what happens in showdowns where people are like I refer to it as like the chess move like clock, where someone makes a change, tap, and then the next person goes and does exactly the same, and they counter that change. And that's where, when we get to the knockouts, that's where we see those fascinating tactical battles happening between people. The thing is, when you are playing strikerless, unless it's working, you've got a limited number of, like, you've already limited your options to what you can do, because you've already sort of removed a strata out of the pitch. So because you've limited yourself to that, you can only move players around a certain number of positions anyway. You take away the striker role, you've then basically got the defensive line up to AM, and that's it, that you can move players around. So if someone decides to sit back fully against you, and like they can just, as long as their defense is good enough, they will soak up. And because Strikeless is so reliant on those off the ball moves, and Mason Mount had a fucking shocking tournament. He should have been so much better. Like we broke down his attributes and said like he is like the perfect player for this tactic because of his off the ball movement, his work rate, everything. We both highlighted him as a really good option. He was just woeful. Whether that was because people marked him out of the game, whether it was because they set up because he was the danger man and prevented him from playing, I guess we'll never really properly know unless we really boil it down. But I think people sort of dropping their defensive line against you and soaking that up and then bouncing you on the counter is probably what did it for the most part. And that's why they were so surprising. Like, they were surprised, or admitted that they were surprised in beating you, because it was more of like that they were fortunate with the goals they got rather than you underperforming. But because it was not necessarily even down to individual mistakes, but because of those because of the counter-attacking goals, it means that they look better than they actually were. The results against you flattered them. Yeah.
You mentioned Mount. It's a Pedri, Mount, Rafinha. Those 3 turn up. It's a completely different showdown. Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. I think based on the XG table, I looked at it on the Saturday night for about 3 hours. I should have been mid-table. Same as last showdown as well. Like, in theory, I should have been
6 goals. Like 6 goals in the league stage.
Mate, when that happens, I know by game 5 I'm in major trouble. Like, all the teams that have been successful with in showdowns, you look back to like the Cavani era, as it was dubbed. Like, he got 14 on his own. You've got to score goals in showdowns. As soon as you're not, like, and my saving grace was this tactic creates chances. Forget the engine, forget AI, forget other people. It's going to create chances. In my derby save at the moment, I'm in the Premier League. I have more chances than Liverpool and City created with a derby freshly promoted side. Like, I'm expecting it to do wonderful things. I had the lowest chance creation on Saturday.
Yeah.
Like, I can't explain why. Like, again, it might be the AI human element to it. I should have scored, I say, double the amount of goals I did, etc., etc. It's irrelevant. It was, but much like everything else, it was interesting. Like, I had a lot of fun with it, and we'll move on to the Sunday. That I said to Clates when I played on Sunday, you won't get a more difficult game than this. Well, that was wrong, because but I equally changed my system to stop him, because he destroyed me in the league 3-0 by half time, didn't score, and I changed, and he didn't do anything in the second half. But then I had like a back of the mind plan of, I'm going to pack out that middle area where Foden sits, and really try and restrict it, and it worked, like, to a degree. There was one moment, I don't know if it was still on the lowdown. Pedri pushes one of his players over to make it like 2-1, 3-1 on aggregate in the second leg, and it's just like, oh, okay, Pedri. That's Pedri's contribution for the weekend, just pushing a player over. And then Clates had the most exciting game of Shell history. I'll say it. Like, the game versus Dan is hilarious. I don't even know where to begin. Both legs, like, unbelievable.
The only thing that I think is up there with it is that final between second yellow card and Kev, where it looked so far out of touch, and then he manages to pull it back. He got close, and then he ended up Kev ended up running away with it, but they were chasing each other. But he got level, and then it went a bit mental. That's the sort of vibe I got from this semi-final.
Yeah, I think you never know when that. Like, it's funny, wasn't it? Because Stinger had the first leg, and Mike's sitting there like, oh god, I'm really going to get a dull game here. But it was just as more so. If anything, it just like went beyond what anyone would have expected, and it became, as you say, it became that sort of tiki-taka or tactical battle, tiki-taka tactical battle of I'll make a change, you make a change, I'll make a change, and it's basically who gets bored first. It's like who's prepared to go, all right, we'll have to just see what happens here. And I think there probably was, I think Clates even was the person to go, all right, I'm going to see what happens. And the fact he pulls it back, the fact he wins and then goes into the final against Jack. And again, we talked about before, Jack's like suspension and injury issues is probably what cost him. Like, Jack probably felt like he had the formula for Clates. I think Jack beat him in the league. Was the person who beat him in the league or drew with him? Definitely took points off him. Didn't lose to Clates.
He hadn't lost. He hadn't ever lost to Clates in a league situation. Or in the previous showdowns, in fact, I think it was.
I was never behind against him in this final, and then loses on penalties.
That was it. Yeah, I think in 90 minutes, he never lost to him. I think that was the stat Andrew gave.
I think because of my rivalry with Jack, people probably thought I didn't want him to win. I wanted Clates to win. You know my theory on this. I want new winners. I love when you have a new person win. That's why I loved Holly winning so much. It's like, it's great to see someone else have it for a bit and be able to say, I've won a showdown. Whereas Clates and Kev don't subscribe to that. They've just concluded, no, these are ours. So yeah, really curious to see Clates come back and immediately win another one. I won't tell. He didn't say it on Diz's podcast with him or the chat he had with him, so I won't out him either. But the amount of work that boy and his team do behind the scenes is disgusting. And I'm talking to all of you, know who you are. That is ridiculous what you lot do. And yes, I will do it next time. And yes, you will be in trouble as a result. Like, bloody hell!
I mean, you said saying on the Sunday. What was it that he said? I'm going for a chilled out one this time.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to paraphrase that incorrectly, but
the two people that messaged me before this showdown the most were Dan and Clates, the two people that hadn't been in one this year, going, so what do you think will happen then, draft wise? What do you think's going on? How do you think? Are you excited for the weekend? Who are you picking? What's happening? It was those two guys were in my DMs on Discord more than anybody else before showdown week. It's like, it's good to have you back, lads. Good to have you back. But yeah, arguably we didn't really talk about it before, but arguably the most competitive showdown lineup we've ever had. So when you think that we could have thrown Kev in there as well, like, in terms of tactically, it was it was definitely screwed in. It was really interesting to see what it would be like with so many people wanting to win and have these different tactical ideas. It was very cool. It was, I think Holly said, this is a lot harder than the last one we did. It's like, yeah, sorry about that. I've thrown in Clayton and Dan to the mix. I can only apologise. It made for such an interesting weekend. Sorry, Jack. I was smiling as you were saying about it. Like, there is, of course, one element of I'd love him to win, but the fact he bottled it so hard was fucking fantastic. I really enjoyed that element of it. We've now both lost 3 finals. Yeah. So go Oz. Let's go. We really are a disgrace. I don't know how to say.
Although Jack's have been a bit more recent than yours, so.
Yeah, sorry. True. I think mine this century. I forget.
I'm not convinced they were actually.
They were a while ago. Yeah, I've been in a lot more elimination games recently than I've been.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you say you have been in elimination. Eliminations. Yeah. I was trying to make it sound like a final, but it's not really.
Thanks, mate. No, well, yeah, I've won a trophy this tournament in a way. So, do you get a trophy? Is there a trophy for the elimination playoff? I don't think there is.
I think it says you might, but that's purely down to database limitations.
Yeah, I believe it.
I have turned it off, so there's no like trophy parade or anything around the ground. So it's not an option.
No, then. So no,
yeah, okay, not listed as champion is unticked. So
if I start going for them, that's when I've really hit rock bottom. I don't know. We'll get into that point.
I mean, you've got one, so well done.
That's true. We could talk to Clates all. I could talk about Clates' win. all podcasts, but there's no point. Go and watch his interview with Diz, where they go in depth of what Clates did, how he fought over the weekend. It's on the channel right now.
Card will be up above our heads somewhere.
If you can still use cards,
I think you can. I think they're still a thing.
I don't know. YouTube, mind of its own. Until about 3, I'm slagging off YouTube there. The Showdown will absolutely move to YouTube in about 3 years when Twitch really have messed it up. So that's exciting. Tune in for that, everybody. Right, shall we get to some questions, Matthew? Because it was overall a good weekend. We've had, there's 27. So I'm going to try and pick through the best ones. I've not looked at these beforehand, so if any of these are bad, then it's not my fault. We've got Thassos, I think. Question 1, can we get a smash cut of all of Matt Blanco's faces he pulled during the match between Dan and Clates? I don't know if there's a hard drive big enough. And we'll be getting the opposite version of the last draft, where there's only players aged over 31 and 32. We've looked at it. It's interesting, right? We've looked at doing that. It's nowhere near as good a pool, actually, frankly, as the younger one is. I won't say no, but I think it's significantly more unlikely than the younger one. I don't think it'll be next, is sort of what I'm saying. And also, everyone's probably predicting it's be next. So I'll tell you now, it probably won't be the next one. Thoughts on that, Matthew?
We did look at it, didn't we, on the Sunday, sort of during the briefing, we were thinking it's a bit more difficult to manage because not just, I mean, there are a multitude of reasons. Like it makes it, I think, very goalkeeper and defender heavy, because that's usually where, like, it's odd. You think, when you think about like Football Manager and the little tooltips you get, it says that goalkeepers peak between the ages of X and Y, and defenders peak between the ages of X and Y. So, and then there's also outfield players that have a general rule of thumb. Elite players at that sort of age differs drastically to one Nickids and sort of players being under the age of 24 and under. So it's a big shift in terms of how we could balance that. We as Ben was saying, we wouldn't say never. We need a bit more time to work out when it would be possible to do something like that.
Yeah, what you'd get, and it's quite different to the other one actually, is that you'd get a lot of players picked. Actually, it's worth working out the average age of everyone's teams over the last Showdown. We didn't do that, but that'd have been interesting. What we found looking at the older database is that you probably wouldn't pick that many players over 34. So you just end up with a whole draft of like 32, 33-year-olds that have still got it, basically. And you wouldn't get that many outside of that. Maybe Ibra would be picked, and that's kind of Ronaldo, Messi. And outside of that, there aren't too many people.
You should be an expert at that draft pool, really, but it's literally your shopping list for FM.
Yeah, to be fair, if I do it, it's when things have got desperate, similar to what I said before. Yeah, when I'm only doing players over 36, then you'll know. We've had
Andy Tannoy's not in this draft pool.
We've had a few questions. Oh, he's been banned from football at the moment. Best not talk about it. Regularity for those that are unsure. You won't be watching. Yulimu asked us a few questions. Who's improved the most in Showdowns in terms of drafting and tactics? He's got a team behind him. I still think Clates is one of those people. Clates started off really badly in Showdowns when he first started. People forget this now, but the first few Showdowns Clates had, I knocked him out. So, it was bad. It was really bad. I'm trying to think if anyone else has really grown into it and developed into it. We've not had that many newer winners, so it's hard to say. Kev's always been quite good. Z's always been there or thereabouts. Been a bit up and down, but he's always around.
If
I've got worse.
Well, there is that. Curtie's got better, but I did say on Sunday this is PP post Pumpster Curtie.
Yeah, it's true. Well, Pumpster was part of my team for 4 Showdowns. We didn't win any of them either.
But Curtie was just getting knocked out all the time, whereas
that's true as well. 2, will we expect any crazy future twists or crazy twists in the future? Yep. Just can't tell you what they are. Will there be any new debutants in the future? Now, in this one, we technically had 2 returning debutants with Clates and Dan, who had both been in before, but not been in for Dan hadn't been in the whole of last year, so it wasn't like. Yeah. We've been waiting for him. It was a good opportunity to get him involved, though. And say Clates returned. Blanco was a new person entirely this time around. The conversation was had at the end of Sunday, as it always is. There's always people on the radar. I think right now we're in a position where there's quite a few people that I think will be ready in months rather than weeks. So we're just sort of waiting and seeing. Never say never. Like Frank, again, I said it earlier on, I don't know who the lineup's going to be for the next one. I'll try and make it and build it to be as interesting as I can. So we'll see, right? I'm not saying no. I'm just saying I don't know, but probably not at this point. But will there be debutantes in the future? Yes, absolutely. I'm hoping there'll be 50 of them, but not for the next showdown. Again, I don't really know. We'll see who's available. Again, quite a lot of questions flowing around. I'm going to let you ask this one, actually, Matt, if that's all right. I'll let you ask the question. So we'll flip it on its head a little bit.
Okay, so this is from FM Draft Diary. Have you or would you consider defining different/specific parameters for each round of the draft, then not revealing them until minutes before to the participants? Would be good to see that level of chaos and make the draft itself a really interesting and fresh watch. I will say, fuck no.
I'll say in a way, actually. Because I think his question's in two-part, right? In that, like, he's actually saying to let them find out late is fine. There's two-part. Would we do what we said before? No, we talked about that earlier on. But would we do it where people find out the draft pool super late? We've done it once before. People might have forgotten. We did it once. I think it's definitely something you can do. It's difficult when I'm in it because I tend to come up with a draft pool to then go, oh, by the way, it's coming out really late. Like, we let people know quite early, actually, this time around. I think they knew halfway through the week what the pool was going to be, to give people enough time to prep. But yeah. So
the difficulty
it's a bit of a yes and no.
Well, the difficulty with doing this is the preparation for the lowdown is key.
Yeah.
And if we're not able to work around that limitation, then it makes it very difficult. So the last time we did something similar is where we had 3 selections available, and then it was left to Twitch to decide which pool we decided on. But we then had to prepare for each of them. So that means we only used 3 out of 9. I can't remember if it was nations or leagues. I think it was nations, right? It was nations, I think.
Yes, it was nations. Yeah, there was. Yeah,
but we had effectively done the same prep 3 times for 3 separate nations. It's a lot of work to throw away for nothing, so it's especially, I think it was towards the end of FM 20. Actually, was it? Maybe it was FM 20, midway through FM 20. I can't really remember, but it's that when reading these sorts of things, it's not a case of we don't want to do it. It's a case of we need to appreciate people's time. And I think when I read through some of these sorts of things, I get really pissed off, and then I realise they don't see what we do behind the scenes, and there's a complete lack of respect for people's time, thinking, oh yeah, you could just do this. Yeah, we could if we had a Sky Sports style gallery of researchers to do it for us. We don't, and there is a limited amount of time. Like I said, we would have had this done before we'd have gone through this on a Monday, ready for preparing graphics for a Wednesday. That basically gives us 24 hours plus a few to have stuff ready. It's not a lot of time to get a lot of information together.
I think some people might question why. I think the thing, as in why is there not more time, is because not everyone does this full time. This is quite the simple answer. If everyone worked on the showdown full time, then this would probably happen. I think people some people are naive to that, but I think that's sort of why we do this. It's so they understand sort of what goes into it, and hopefully people will watch this and understand some of the things we go through. And I don't know if any of the other guys in other tournaments watch it and take a few bits from this as well. So hopefully it's useful. Hopefully people enjoy it. 4 more questions, Matthew. I'll let you ask for the one from Thomas. Go on then. Ping it in FM.
Ping it in FM. Is Ben prepared to sell out and play the system to get a W? Also, is there plans to introduce a trade window, either post-draft or halfway through, perhaps?
Yes, I am prepared to sell out and do the Kev thing. I'm at that point now where I think I might have to. And the trade window, we've talked about it for 2 years plus. I would love to do it. I just don't know what it looks like yet in the way that we do it. We would have to mold it in a very showdown specific way. I think I know how it looks. I'm getting closer to formulating it and then telling Matt the whole idea, and Matt goes, oh God, right, well no, and then Matt then spends a week figuring out how it's yes. But yeah, right now it's not quite there. Football Manager's functionalities are troublesome. But yeah, there's definitely a way to do it. You have to do it so it means something, though. There's no point of just doing it for no one to make trades. There has to be some reasoning into what you can make happen.
The other difficulty for that is it muddies the waters when it comes to the statistics that we're trying to make meaningful. So it makes it difficult to, again, it depends on when it would happen, but say if we're saying, oh, there's a mid-league stage trade or something like that, or whether it be mid-draft or what have you, it becomes, it makes things quite, it's very much dependent on when that happens. As to, and then how do we track that? Because at the moment, everything is not geared in the background to handle that sort of thing, so we could track statistics across a player's showdown performance, but for two different teams. It would become troublesome. I guess there are ways. I'm thinking now, like as soon as you say things, I'm like, well, how would you do that? I think there are ways, but again, it's not a decision that we'll be making soon because it's super complex. We'll talk about it after this podcast. T Hatch said, thanks for addressing this on stream over the weekend, but is there anything that can be done, re broken tactics? Had a few comments about broken / glitchy tactics. I'd rather see games with more realistic tactics formations versus taking advantage of a match engine. This was actually a conversation that was had on Twitter during the week. I think Alistair, who's involved in Wasted Possession, sort of brought it up. The conversation was sort of around downloaded tactics. And to me, the downloaded tactics are just tactics. They're not like, they don't necessarily, as we've seen with Strikerless, right? Doesn't necessarily work in a PvP environment. So is there such thing as a downloaded broken tactic? Depends what the other person's playing. Like, I'm very much of the opinion that you let people use whatever they want, and it's up to the people in the show. Because I think that Football Manager is still this manipulative. You can let people do whatever they want because the other person on the other side can equally do whatever they want to try and prevent that tactic from working. And in certain situations, we definitely saw that happen. Every tactic in Football Manager has a pressure point that you can affect and manipulate. So and equally every so they have a weakness, and because there is a weakness in every tactic, there are ways to exploit those weaknesses. So you can't ask people to be more traditional or more realistic. I think part of the excitement around the Showdown is seeing systems you never see in AI play, because in AI play you can be a bit lazier with it. Frankly, you can use things that you know are going to work, that you've had worked for X amount of years. In Showdowns or in PvP play, that's not the case. You can be a bit more creative with it. Basically, I have tried to be for the last every Showdown, frankly. My new phrase is going well, working well. But yeah, but I always try and bring something a little bit new, and I think there's quite a few other guys as well that do the same thing. There's a related question to this actually, which Breezy asked. He wasn't involved this time around, but is a big part of the YouTube channel, of course, and everything else we do. He's said, in both of your opinions, is it possible anyone can win a showdown without playing the meta of the big meaty men? Can a tactic such as Strikerless really be successful in terms of winning the whole thing? I'll see what you say first, Matt, and then we'll come back to me. Well, I guess to address the first question from T, it's you'll see who the real managers are and who aren't, who have downloaded tactics when it doesn't work and they don't know how to fix it, because they've downloaded it and it works against the AI, so it must work against PvP, and then it doesn't. And then they don't know what to change because it's not their tactic. They don't actually know how it works or how to manipulate it to counter other people's tactics. So I think if you rely too much on downloaded tactics, I think you will get found out fairly quickly, unless it does just break the match engine and people aren't able to counter it. So I'm in complete agreement with you there, Ben. It's up to each person, and equally from our perspective, how the hell do you police who is using a downloaded one and who isn't? Ultimately, all it takes is for them to download it in a different game and save it as something else, and you're never going to know. So it just becomes ridiculous how you police that. But there you go. But to address Breezy's question, I guess it's kind of an extension of that, really. Like, is there a meta about it? Like, I know they're efficient and they're good, but equally you could say the same is true in real life. Like, players who are physically imposing, whether that be because they are expressly fast, whether they can jump in the air, whether they're incredibly strong, or all three, you will always struggle to defend against that type of person. Why do you think Lewandowski's amazing? Because he's good at, he's all of those things. So when you get someone who is that good in real life, why shouldn't that work in FM either? And equally, I think if you can get the right players and the right tactic working, and also exploit the space that someone else leaves, find the pressure point, as you've referred to it, Ben, and exploit that for each person, there's no reason why any particular tactic can't beat another. Yeah. We've seen, you see the likes of Pep get bested, whether that's through tactical players or tactical changes or through player selection. It's down to you as a manager to find those chinks in people's armour, whether that be again through a tricky play. We see tricky players. I think RDF actually raised the point on Sunday in his interview, saying that people got in his head. He drafted bigger players than he would normally, and they didn't turn up for him. So he said, you know what, I'm going back to what I know. I'm going back to smaller, tricky players who I know how I can manage best. Yeah. So I think RDF has kind of proved it for all of us, really, saying that actually there may be a meta. Perhaps it's easier if you've got a player who is one of these big meaty men.
Is it the fail-safe? Is it, if it's going wrong, at least I've got this?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't, and that's how I felt in the last showdown in 3, is that I didn't have any, really. I had a couple, and a couple's not enough. You need 5, 6. I thought your point there on it, like it mimics real life. You look at Haaland, you look at Van Dijk, you look at Lewandowski, you look at these guys that are the big meaty men. They are the best players in the world right now, some of them. So, and like when you pair more than that, when you can then pair more of them together, that's when you see like it becomes too strong. Also, like you're right, athletic players are sort of the meta of football right now.
It's an absolute trend with how tactics have changed over the past 5 years, where pressing has become so much more intensive and the mainstay across all divisions, regardless of the quality of players. Players have had to get fitter to be able to keep up with the intensity of the game as a whole. We find it odd with teams playing how Sean Dyche would manage teams, where it's very much 2 banks of 4 and a low block. Even the likes of Atletico have kind of ditched that. Yes, in Champions League they will very much revert back to type, but in the league they don't play like that anymore. So if you're getting managers who are known for defensive football switching their style of defensive football to combat this, then SI pride themselves on Football Manager being as close as of a simulation to actual football as possible. It's only right that you're going to see tactics that have that focus on pressing be more effective, because that is what happens in real life.
Yeah, and so to that, I don't think there are, like, maybe people disagree, I don't think there are broken tactics. Like, I don't necessarily subscribe against the AI. Like, yeah, maybe there are some tactics that are just so strong. And the strikerless one is one of those, by the way. Like it is really strong against AIs, because you're basically making the AI do stuff they don't know what to do. The AI is still effective in PvP. Again, it's just the amount of decisions you can make quickly that then alter how the other person's playing. But again, you're still playing against a human in that sense. So how broken can it be? On that, we've never, like, if there were broken tactics, there'd be one formation that would win every showdown. Yeah. And that's never really happened. It's been like Kev uses like 3 that he flicks between. Holly used a 4-3-3. Clates used obviously is a combination of 3 tactics, but mainly that 3 striker with 1 in behind that is very strong this year in AI and online play. It's something no one really talks about. People go, yeah, it doesn't work against humans. It's like, well, Clates' works brilliantly against AI and humans. Like that sort of tactic does work in both settings. Ultimately, again, I think it's not on us to decide if something breaks the engine. Again, the term broken is like I think I said it. I probably said, oh, Clates is broken tactic. What I meant was his tactic that's beating me. That was really annoying because I'm losing. It's on Football Manager to alter the engine if they think things are broken. The only instance we found so far, like true instance of something being broken, was the long throws being broken, and we reported that to Football Manager. And to give people an idea of why it was broken, a player with 20 long throws was as good as a player with 6. in terms of effectiveness and goal scoring. So you could have a player with 6 long throws who would still be able to do, if he was told to do a long throw, it might not be as accurate, but sometimes that would mean it was more effective. So that was in theory broken.
Yeah, in a sense, unless we
shouldn't be an attribute, but we can't get into that right now. We've not got time.
Unless we start seeing players who are consistently scoring from like 35 yards with long shots of 3, finishing of 3, and against Donnarumma, for example, you know that and when there's a raft of players in front of them, like when there are odd in-game scenarios that shouldn't be happening, and there's no way that they would happen other than there is. It's either taking advantage of a match engine frailty, or that there is just a genuine issue that happens in PvP but doesn't really happen against AI. They're the only things, like you mentioned about the long throw, that we then have a decision to make. I don't want to be. We mentioned it when we were talking about sort of the draft strategies. We don't want to be too prescriptive, and that goes for tactics as well. We don't want to say, like, ultimately, we want this to be fun for people who are coming in and competing, as well as it gives us a talking point to talk about on the Lowdown, that people are using these different tactics and how effective they're going to be against different people. That's football, like in real life football. It's nice talking about that sort of stuff. But I think if we start saying, oh, well, you can't use this tactic, you can't use that tactic because X, Y, and Z, people aren't going to want to do it anymore, because it's like, well, that's what I use. Why can't I use it? And then it also we become arbiters for a situation we don't really want to be arbiters for, where we can say, is this tactic okay or is this tactic okay? And it's just like, why do we have a rule book, as it were?
It's like some esports have this. It's like a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah,
like everyone agrees not to do certain things. For example, the most obvious one is you don't get to take 10 minutes to decide what happens when you're making a sub. For example, like you have to hurry up. Like there has to be a point of Saturday is done at a speed. In respect to everybody, Sundays are more tactical. You get a little bit more time. It's accepted amongst everyone. That's the way it goes. Like you can't enforce time limits on people. You can't enforce certain things, and that sort of falls into tactics as well.
We can, but we don't.
We can, but we don't. Yeah. Until Z, like I think we made the joke on the weekend, is that the only way I was making it to Sunday is if I just sort of made it last. If I could just stretch it out, that was my best bet. I'm still streaming on Sunday, guys. You know, technically on a Saturday, but you know, it all works. So yeah, final question came in just to round us off. Then Geordie167 said, "Would you consider using the retro database for future showdown?" We've answered this before, but the playoffs are doing it this time around. Not the showdown. The playoffs, who are a similar tournament, they're doing it. And I think it'll be really interesting. Like I'll definitely be watching. We won't do it because I'll never plan to use a retro database in a showdown. For me and for us personally, I just think it's a bit too niche. Like I think you're focusing in on a time period where, unless you were born then, it goes over your head pretty quickly. And that's so I was around the era of knowing who some of the players are in 92, 93. But yeah, unless that retro database is 2015, I don't think there's any chance we'll do it, because again, there's other reasons for like data, right? We keep a lot of data on the current players within the current engine, and if you're then using players, like it's one reason that I'm really hesitant now to use like Gary Lineker or Maradona or Pele, because it kind of breaks all the other data. So yeah, there's things we can still do to make it interesting, like we did this time around, where you're still using players from that era, but yeah, I think the long and short of it is it's probably not something we'll do. Like again, I don't want to say never, because I don't know. Something cool might come out and I want to use it, and then I don't want people to go, but you said, like, I don't know, maybe. But yeah, there's no planning at this point to use that. But the playoffs are, check it out all this weekend. I'm pretty sure they're streaming, so feel free to check. If you look at the Football Manager page on Twitch, you'll definitely find it in the evenings. And I think that wraps us up, Matthew.
I think it does.
That's our longest one ever, right? Must be.
Probably close to it if it isn't. Yep.
Crikey, this is now it's a podcast. It's a proper podcast now. Thank you for watching, everybody. Me and Matt will be back for the next Streamer Showdown. I'm gonna have to get the dates up, Matt, because I can't just say final weekend.
I know what they are.
Yeah. The draft will be on Wednesday, the 1st of June, and then Saturday and Sunday, the 4th and the 5th. That is when the next showdown will be. We have always said the final weekend of the month. we figured you and I, and everyone really, would want to watch the Champions League final. So we thought rather than trying to fight it, we would let everyone watch it and enjoy it. The amount of Liverpool games I've missed this season, from the pissing network game or the draft or the showdowns, is ridiculous.
Yeah,
so
it's quite a lot.
We've got a few Liverpool fans and quite a lot of football fans in the showdown. So we're going to make sure they can all enjoy a Champions League final. And then we will, I don't know, maybe do a Champions League themed draft, Matt. Again, I don't know, viewers. I don't know. We'll see. Take care of yourselves. We'll be back, as I say, very, very soon. There'll be loads of content going out on the channel as well. Massive shout out to Diz and the guys for putting together some really great stuff. Make sure you watch it at some point. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Bye, Matthew. Take care.
And if you're not already...
Oh, yes, do this. Good.
I'm doing links. So follow us on Twitter at the FM Showdown, and also follow us on Twitch. It is at FM Streamer Showdown. Now we can say goodbye then.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Not the calm down. Cool down. Bloody hell.